Join From Beer to the Bible every week as Irvin Lee and co-host Sarah Oliveira McDonald warn others of the consequences of drug and alcohol addiction by being the voice of faith-based recovery. Every week, Irvin and Sarah help people get access to the treatment and counseling they so desperately need. They explore the depths of addiction and give practical life examples of how to recover and develop a new rhythm of living. The show is gritty, authentic, and simply raw while being rooted in the love, faith, and hope of God. Welcome to From Beer to the Bible.
Welcome. This is your host, Irvin Lee of From Beer to the Bible. Super excited today. I have what I believe I have uncovered a great diamond, someone who is going to bless us with knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of how to be fit and how to stay sober and how to walk prayerfully with the Lord God. My new friend, Melody, say hi. Introduce yourself.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Irvin. I'm so excited to be here.
I cannot wait to get into it with you, but I have to share how we met. So I'm really posting ghost on social media. I really just post the ministry content. But I happen to be scrolling one day and I see this light talking about her love of Christ and her women's Bible study group. And I'm going, Lord, we have to have her on the show. So I just took a leap of faith, and we have to do that in life. I took a step of faith and I DM'd her and said, hey, would you mind being on our show? This weird show called From Beer to the Bible, where we love Christ and we talk about recovery in Christ. So thank you for trusting us enough to come on and share your testimony.
Well, and thank you so much for the opportunity and for such kind words. And I'm excited that we have connected.
Yeah, well, give us a bit of your story. Let's just get into it.
All right. Well, so my story, from a very early age, I found that I was uncomfortable, and at a very young age, I discovered what alcohol could do for me. And I, at the age of 12, for the first time, drank at a party and got drunk. And I truly thought I have discovered what I needed to discover. It took me out of my reality at that point in life. And honestly, just gave me an internal peace around things that were going on. And I chased that for a long time. When you're that young and things are, you're developing and you're growing, and you kind of halt that process when you introduce that at such a young age. And it did not lead me down a good path. I was obviously, it didn't really escalate until I got a little bit older, that I was able to do it more frequently when I was in high school. But it was my solution for everything. It was my solution for sadness, for, all of the emotions that we experience as humans. That was my solution. And it led down some pretty dark roads. But I didn't know any other way, because I had started it, at such an early age. That was my only tool. I was raised in a church. We were at church 3 times a week. We were there on Sunday mornings, Sunday nights, Wednesday nights. We did it was this duplicitous life kind of that I was living, hiding it from my parents. It wasn't accepted in my household, so it was hiding it. And I was just really looking back on, my high school years. I was just a really sad, depressed child, that really I never had learned how to express those things or try to figure out how to get help for that. So that was my solution.
We're in this series where we're talking about being mad at God. So where was God in all of this? Were you mad? Were you disappointed? What was your understanding of God's role and in how you're feeling in your drinking and, what would become your addiction?
So, what I think when back at that point, it was the idea of God. I didn't ever have a personal relationship with God at that point in my life. So I saw God kind of as I saw other stories. I knew the concept, I knew the stories. I could recite what I needed to recite to, get the approval of the Sunday school teacher, but it
Right.
didn't mean anything to me. It was all just head knowledge. And I wasn't I didn't have adults in my life really that um well, I'll just say that it to me was not, it was not a personal relationship.
Okay.
There was God, here was me. I was not good. I knew the things I was doing were not right. And so he was probably mad at me. And so I didn't really acknowledge anything about God. Things came kind of to a an abrupt reality when I went off to college.
Okay.
I was 18. I went off to college, was 700 miles away from my house. And within the first 6 months of being in college, I found out that I was pregnant with my boyfriend at the time. And
Okay.
so I'm 19 years old and I'm pregnant, and I was still heavily drinking and but keeping up all appearances. My grades were great. My parents still had no idea. And when that happened, for me, that was a huge, life-changing moment. My mom had always been pro-life, so I'd always been around, I knew what abortion was. I knew all of those ramifications. I'd always said I was pro-life. But you really don't know what you are until you're faced with that situation. At least for me, that was my experience.
Yeah.
And I had a decision to make. And I was in college in Mississippi, and at that time they had a law that I had scheduled an abortion, and I went to the clinic and they did the ultrasound, and they had a law there where you had to wait 24 hours. I'd already paid for it. I'd already done everything. And you had to wait 24 hours though, before you actually went through with the procedure after
Okay.
you do the ultrasound. And that 24 hours saved my son's life. Because I went home and I just knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So I
Now, did
canceled
you
it.
pray or you just how did that work? How did
You know, I for the first time I called my cousin, who is actually now a preacher,
Okay.
and we were very close. And I called him and I told him that I was pregnant, because I was, the girls I was hanging out with in college, they, a few of them had had abortions already. And, I was not in church. I was not surrounding myself. I mean, I was going down this other path.
Okay.
So I wasn't getting that kind of guidance from them to do anything other than to terminate. But I called my cousin and I said, this is what's happened. And he said, well, I mean, you couldn't really have an abortion. That wouldn't be, what you believe, or, and it just made me stop and realize, I can't do this.
Mhm.
I didn't pray. I didn't ask God. I mean, I was so far at that point from God, and I'd not yet had an intimate relationship with him, that wasn't a thought that crossed my mind, because I'd
Okay.
never really had that.
Okay.
Um, but thank the Lord, I did not go through with it, and he's 29 years old today.
Praise God.
That was 29 years ago.
Well, I
So
believe you made the right decision, and God honors and blesses you, and now you have a beautiful treasure of a son.
absolutely, an incredible relationship with my son. And you know, that was when, you know, immediately when that happened, and I decided I was going to keep him, the desire to go out, the desire to do all that left. I mean, I no longer wanted any part of that. I wanted to take care of him, and I wanted to nurture him. And so I moved back home. At the time, my parents were going through a divorce. They had been married 24 years. So it was a lot of just turmoil in my family. And on top of that, I'm now 19 and pregnant. And but after I had my son, that was really the first time that I started to really look at my life. Now I'm a mom.
Right.
Now I'm responsible for this other human being. Now it's not just me living for me. I've got to reevaluate things. And I had always felt safe when I was at church. I just had this feeling of safety because I was raised there, right?
Yeah.
Although there was not that intimate relationship with God yet, that felt safe. So I started going to church. And I at about when my son was about 2 years old, I had married his dad, but that was an abusive relationship. And so I left that marriage. So now I'm a single mom and he's 2. And, I decided, God, I need your help. I need to know about this type of relationship with you. I started seeking, and
Yeah.
the Lord heard me, and I got saved, and I got baptized, and I joined this college and career group at a church that I was involved in, and really began to seek the Lord. I got involved at that point. I was no longer interested in drinking. I got involved in AA at that point.
Okay.
I went through the steps. I met a wonderful sponsor named Sherry, who we are still in contact today. And that was when I was, 22, 23, went back to college. I got my degree. And God was with me throughout. I mean, it was the very beginning of my walk with him.
And now you have, at that point, how's the relationship? And do you recognize that God really wants relationship versus religion? And I think, and I'm asking because it seems to be a common theme for us who fall into addiction. We see God is not a relationship God.
Yes. What I used to think about God was that he was upset with me because of what I was doing. And he was up there with like a stick, just waiting to bop me on the head because he was mad because of what I was doing, because of the way I was living. And I was full of shame. I was full of, I think when you're full of shame, you don't want to go approach God, right? For me, I didn't. I felt like I was not worthy. I felt like I wasn't being who he wanted me to be. And so rather than go and try and fix that, I just avoided. And I feel like there was this big disconnect. And so, when I was 22 and I began following him and I began to build this relationship, it was very different. I began to incorporate him. Like you said, did you pray about it? I began to pray. I began to slowly grow my walk with the Lord. And I began to experience moments of that peace that passes all understanding.
Yeah.
I look back at that time in my life between 22 and 25, and I was a single mom. I was working 2 jobs, and I was in college to get my degree, and I was a brand new baby Christian, and I was in AA working these steps.
You were doing
I had a lot going on.
lot.
And so, I look back at that and I think, and I mean, I'm 22, so I can handle it, right? I'm not how old I am now. So it was doable, but it was a journey. But I look back at that and a lot was vying for my attention. At 25, when I graduated college, I ended up meeting somebody and we got married. And when we got married, I kind of took on the religion that he was a part of, which was very different than what I had been raised in. And I kind of was trying to just ride the coattails of his religion. And so it kind of stunted things for me in my walk with God. I turned back to drinking a few years later to resolve things that were happening I was not able to speak about in the marriage. And unfortunately, that took me right back down that path it looked different than it did in high school, but it took me right down that path.
So the pivotal, I guess, the moment of change and the crossroads and the fork in the road was the relationship change with Christ when you decided to take a turn in another direction and go towards another religion.
It did.
Wow, that's powerful, because we all have those little moments when we make these decisions, and at the time they don't feel, and I've been there. So I guess give us practical advice on how do we continue to maintain our walk when we're faced at these crossroads.
That has been a journey, and one that, one of the things that I discovered a few years ago, and I just leaned into, that has helped me and truly shifted the perspective I've had on everything. And that
Okay.
is to understand my true identity in Christ and who I am alone with what Christ says I am. And once I went down that path of trying to fully understand that, and it took me a little bit to get to that point. But when I fully grasp who Christ says I am in
Yeah.
him, for me, everything changed. It changed my perspective on everything. It gives me the ability to have a boldness for him that I couldn't have before. It gives
Yeah.
me my own, it's just me and him.
Mhm.
And I don't seek the approval of other people, because my approval comes from him.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of pain to get me to that point, of fully understanding that, but that has been a game changer for me.
Wow, that's powerful. That's a great word. So you get married and you start drinking again. And how long does it take for you to hit the bottom and then hit the reset button and get back with your relationship with Christ and then back into recovery?
So it took a while. So I began using alcohol as a tool for, again, like what I had done previously, for
Okay.
stress relief, for anything that would happen. And I was able to, I used to like to say I was a functional alcoholic, which is a joke, because functional, I'm like, I can show up physically, but
Yeah.
you can also be a very shallow human and just show up physically somewhere
Yeah.
and not have any depth because of drinking. But it probably took about 10 years for it to really escalate. Let me back up I got to give you a little bit more context of one other thing that happened. I had
Please.
a sister
Okay.
who was 2.5 years younger than me, and she struggled with alcoholism as well,
Okay.
and it's all through my family tree. So my dad showed me a picture one time of like 9 old guys standing there in a black and white picture.
Okay.
Nobody's smiling. It's one of those black and white, old days. And 7 out of the 9 died from alcohol related something.
Okay.
So it's definitely in my genealogy. But my sister also struggled, and I was not in recovery when she was struggling in 2005, and she ended up taking her life, which was devastating. That was, at a point in my life where alcohol was still my solution.
Okay.
And so I didn't speak of her death. We moved a lot in that marriage, and we would move to a new city, and nobody would know I had a sibling, and they would ask, and I would just say no, because I couldn't speak of it. I couldn't talk of it. So, and I did not process that until I get sober in 2015. But I remember that woman, Sherry, I mentioned a little bit ago, that I knew from when I was 22. I remember her saying to me when I got sober finally in 2015, she said, Melody, I thought when Cindy took her life, that was going to be a wake-up call for you, that like, this is potentially, that's going to be the thing that did it. And what's so mind-blowing to me still when I think about it is that thought never crossed my mind, that maybe that's a reason to not drink any longer. Like that never even crossed my mind. So I would say that from 2005 to 2015, that was one of the primary ways that I would cope with that when I would think about it. A lot of the times I would just try to shove it down, but that was that was a coping mechanism. And, I'm so grateful that God did it the way he did it, with bringing me to my bottom. I will say the last 3 years of my drinking, so I finally got sober in 2015,
Okay.
but the last 3 years of my drinking, I had a fitness company that was very successful. We had, like 170 locations across the state of Texas. And I was running that for 10 years. The last 3 years of my drinking, became to the point where, again, nobody knew. I was a personal trainer. I was
Right. Your
trying to
family,
help
your husband, no
my
one's noticing anything?
no, and it was not a daily thing. It was not even sometimes a weekly thing. I was more
Okay.
of like a binge drinker where, and I would just be able to manage how, it came out. I mean, I don't know how people didn't know, but they didn't, because what happened was the last year of my drinking in 2015, it was the height of the business success. We
Okay.
had the most locations we'd ever had. We had the most trainers. We had just purchased a home that was the largest home we'd ever had. That was the year of the most internally, spiritually bankruptcy you can imagine for me. And
Wow.
I'm
So
grateful.
everything's going great on the outside, but you tell me how you're feeling on the inside.
Oh, it was terrible. Yeah, if you looked at a Facebook reel from that year of my life, you would have thought everything was amazing. No, internally I was completely empty. I was this I if you ever had one of those Easter bunnies, on the chocolate Easter bunnies during
Yeah.
Easter time, you like poke a hole and it's empty on the inside. It's
Uh-huh.
just like this shell.
Yeah.
That is how I felt as a human that last year of my drinking. I felt like I had no capability of truly connecting with another human. I was literally living this duplicitous life that was contrary to everything I was saying. I mean, it truly was a really awful experience, but one of the blessings that came out of it being that year that I finally, for the very first time, was truly teachable, truly willing, truly open to doing whatever, because this had to stop. What I learned.
Where's the Lord in all of this? Are you talking to him? Are you in relationship? Are you mad at him, disappointed, calling on him? Where's the Lord?
The Lord is still, I still feel like the Lord doesn't want much to do with me. So I still feel this, because of this religion I'd been a part of, there's a lot of shame involved in that. And so I felt like this black sheep that God probably is just like not interested, it's not there yet. It's coming. It's about
Okay.
to get here where I finally, like, it clicks. The fact that I could be that internally bankrupt, yet have all of these external things that the world says makes you happy,
Yeah.
the lesson that I learned in that is literally none of that stuff matters. Not one piece of it matters, without relationship with Christ. I raised my hand and I said there was no catastrophic event. There was no DUI. There was no external ramification of my drinking that was known to the public or known to anyone. I went to my now ex-husband and I said, I've got a problem and I think I need to go and get help. And I told him how I'd been drinking and how I'd been hiding it. And so I found a treatment center here in Texas, La Hacienda, and I checked myself in. And, I was like a sponge when I was there. I
Yeah.
wanted it so bad because I had been trying so hard on my own, minus God.
Uh-huh.
So that's a big, big caveat right there.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to do this with the power of God. I was trying to do this on my own. And I had tried and failed so many times in that last 3 years of my drinking that I said, I've got to go somewhere. And so, I didn't have to do the detox thing because I wasn't physically addicted. But when I went in there, I was a sponge, and those counselors and those therapists, for the first time, we looked at my sister's death. We looked at the things that that, all of the things that were going on. And they helped me so tremendously to see, and they taught me lessons, and they taught me tools for living, and they taught me about the importance of community and the importance of relationship with God, and that this is a spiritual condition, and that this is, all of the things that I learned were invaluable. And I really say that, I was 42 years old when I went in, and I say that my life, we had that glimpse of relationship with God at 22, and I was saved at 22, but then at 25, I pretty much put that on pause and tried to do things a different way. And 17 years later, it doesn't work. It did not work. And so that was really the beginning of my understanding about this disease, and understanding about shame, and understanding that God's been there the whole time, and it's been my own lack of willingness to invite him to be a part of, and to come, and all of that. That's really where it began.
When it's time to surrender and seek a solution, talk to our listeners around the importance of treatment. Yes, prayer, God can do anything, but a lot of times the Lord takes us through a process of healing. So I want you to talk about the importance of surrendering and seeking treatment and counseling.
Sure. I think that for me, treatment is a 30-day just reprieve from your everyday norm. And so for me, it was important they take my phone. I'm on call as the CEO of that organization, and had, a lot of people that were looking to me for guidance. I needed to just take 30 days and move away from that. And that was real hard to do, but I was willing to do whatever it took. And I remember when I went into La Hacienda, and they said, we have this thing at like 5:30 in the morning, and it's called Seekers. I don't know if they still do that, but basically at 5:30 in the morning, it was optional, and you could go up to the top of their hill, and you would pray, and you would do little devotional, and you would sing. And they said, I remember them saying, the people who do Seekers, their rate of sobriety, like the people who are consistently doing that, their rate of sobriety, after they leave here is much higher than people who don't. And I remember thinking, well, I don't know why that would be, but I'm going to do it. I had willingness to do whatever they told me to do. And so it doesn't take much. So for the surrender aspect of it, God is there, and he doesn't, a simple step towards God, and he'll take 10 towards you, is what I found. He doesn't make it difficult. I made it difficult, because I was over here hiding in my corner thinking I was this bad person. But the reality was he was there all the time, and I was choosing and not willing to make that first step. But it's so clear to me now why the people who do Seekers have that success rate. And it's strictly because you're building a relationship with God. That's what it is. And you're putting yourself in this pattern of giving him the first few minutes of every single day. And I've continued that, throughout my sobriety. Every single morning when I wake up, that's the first thing I do. My sponsor used to say all the time, before your feet hit the ground, you ask God to direct your thinking. You ask God, what does he have for you today? And I have consistently done that for the last 7.5 years, and it's grown. And I was heavily involved in AA for a long, long time. And at La Hacienda, they taught you the value of community. And I really didn't understand that. I kind of operated in a vacuum, before I got sober. I was running this company. I didn't really have any friends outside of people who worked for me. And it was just this vacuum that I operated in. And so when I was at Laha and they were saying, community is important, again, I did not understand why. It didn't compute, but I did it. And so then when I got out, I realized I've got to build community around myself. So I got very involved in the 12-step programs in AA, which was phenomenal. However, about right at the beginning of COVID, I kind of had this realization, I could quote the big book forwards and backwards. And I knew that the principles of the 12 steps all came from the Bible. They all came from the Oxford group. And so I thought, well, if I can quote that book backwards and forwards, but I don't really I don't really know the Bible as much. Why wouldn't I go to the original source?
Yes.
Because I had heard like there's like thousands of promises. All the promises in the big book had come true for my life. But then I had heard that there's thousands of promises in the Bible. And I mean, it sounds kind of selfish. I'm going to go seek out these promises for myself, but whatever, God uses whatever. So he brought me into the word, and I started reading in the morning. And what started out with just a little bit of time when COVID happened, I thought, I want to come out of this pandemic just knowing my Bible better.
Yeah.
It turned into this thirst where I can't get enough of it. It's how I start my day. And on days where I'm traveling or something else happens, or, we oversleep or whatever, my day is not the same.
Yeah,
but it's
it
that
changes.
first few minutes in the morning for me that shift how I operate for the next 12 hours.
That's awesome, Melody. So tell us more. What's your life like now with Christ and in recovery and all the wonderful things that I know you have going on?
I love sharing what God has done for me in my life with other people. I love being a source of encouragement. It's funny that how you found me on TikTok. I found the Christian side of TikTok to be incredibly encouraging for me during times that were challenging.
Yeah.
On that Christian side of hearing other creators and their walk with God. And so, when I came out of some really challenging times in the last few years, I decided, I want to share what God has done for me and what he continues to do for me. Life today is wonderful. I wake up and, my life is his. I want to be just a vessel that he gets to work through however he sees fit. And that makes life truly an adventure. It truly does. You don't know what God is going to do next. And there's been so many times where he has absolutely blown my mind, working things out in ways that I never could have imagined. And it's just a continued daily surrender to that.
Yeah. You're a great encourager in the Lord. Encourage any woman or single mother who may be in their active addiction. Encourage them to get help and to seek Christ.
Absolutely. I am a single mom at this point as well. And I know it's difficult. I know it's just life is, as a single parent, is difficult. But God is right there with you. And do not sit in shame of what you've done or are doing. Prevent you from making those steps toward God and starting your day in prayer and in the word. It truly is life changing when you bring the power of God into your life and you walk with him. Finding out what my identity is in Christ. Again, just living into that and breathing into that. I have some wonderful authors that I love, like Priscilla Shirer. She wrote a book called Fervent. It's phenomenal. Mark Batterson is also a great author that has written books about, understanding that we are called, if you are a child of God, we are called to live and share about him with others and the power of what he has done in our life. I look back on my life and it's like I've lived two different lives. It's like, prior to 42 was one life. And then the last 7.5 years has been completely different. And it's because I have this walk with Christ that is like nothing else. There's nothing in this world that compares to it at all.
Amen. And I concur and agree. Now, as we get ready to wrap up, I want you to speak about the burden on your heart. But before you do that, talk about going back to being mad at God and how important it is in overcoming being mad, disappointed, angry at God is the transparency and the relationship with God.
Absolutely. That first year of sobriety was really tough for me. And I can remember I was starting this relationship with God, this walk with him. So I didn't have a track record yet of his faithfulness. I didn't have experiences where he had shown up for ways for me that I could identify yet.
Yeah.
Clearly, looking back, there were, but at that point, I didn't have that. And so there was this kind of abyss in the very beginning where I'm borrowing someone else's faith and their hope and seeing what they have and what I want from that, and taking that, and just the prayer. I can remember this prayer that I could pray. The only words that could come out were, God help me, in a very difficult first year of sobriety. And, he met me where I was. He absolutely met me where I was. I could not find even the words and it was, 3:00 wake up calls with adrenaline rushes through my body of just panic because of the situation that was going on. And, I don't have what I'd had for the past 30 years as my coping mechanism any longer. I had this brand new relationship with God, but I would just encourage anyone who's in that position to just keep seeking. And what will happen is you continue seeking, God will continue to show up. You'll build this track record with him of his faithfulness. And that's what has happened, that you can then go back and remember in another time of difficulty, because with life, whether you're sober or not, there are going to be difficulties, right?
Yeah.
So you can go back and say, oh my gosh, God had me then, he's going to have me now. So that's just what I would encourage, is just take that first step towards him, continue to do that. It was not just a one-time event that this happened. This is a daily surrender. But just know that the promises that are in the Bible are true, and he is faithful, and he will uphold those promises, and he draws near to you that are brokenhearted. So if you're going through something difficult, just know that you're not alone in that.
I am so encouraged. We have been blessed by your wonderful testimony, your story. And I am blessed and encouraged by always watching your TikTok and your social media. So please keep doing that. I'm going to ask, will you please come back and share again on the show with us?
Sure, I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed getting to talk with you today.
Oh, well, thank you. And we'll have you back again soon. And to our viewers, please like, share, and subscribe. And please also, the way we're able to do the show is we survive on donations. So if you have an opportunity, visit us at FromBeerToTheBible.com. As I listened to Melody's testimony, it was a testimony of walking by faith and not by sight, trusting in the Lord one day at a time, seeking the Lord. And to close it all out, I would say that you are living proof that the Lord will never leave nor forsake us. The Lord will never leave nor forsake us. If you're suffering from addiction, sin, and shame, realize God is love. God is love, and God is faithful, and he's not mad at you. May God richly bless you.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's From Beer to the Bible. Make sure to tune in next week when Irvin and Sarah gift you with even more addiction recovery information. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And remember, we're always there for you.